Thank you very much. Make sure I can work the kit first. Good. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me today, and especially thank you to Jennifer for all the hard work and the team for today, but also for allowing me a little bit of freedom today. Some of you may have heard me speak about GDPR, and I always try and inject a little bit of that. There's not enough why that goes on, and what's been fabulous about this morning, there's been so much of it, and I think it really gives us a sense of why this is so important from much more than a technological perspective. So I've been given a little bit of a free rein today, so apologies in advance. So thank you first. Okay, big data, big subject. And I've heard people quite a lot lately say they've had their fill of hearing about data protection, GDPR. That's the last time I'm going to say it. And for me, that's a bit like saying you've had your fill of hearing about economic growth, business success, business potential, and what the future looks like. Data is changing the world. So you're hearing about it and you're having a fill of it because it matters. It matters socially, technologically, politically, in every way conceivable. And big data is reshaping the world and us and the way we live, the way we work, the way we think. And from an economic perspective, it's clear that digital data is already a growth driver in a very challenging economy. So data matters, even if the only thing that we care about is money, which of course isn't the case at all. So we've asked today, it's a nice quote, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm not sure, there's from Tony, PwC there, about why can't Guernsey become a trusted location for data. That's in bold there, the quote from him. So firstly, we need to understand what we mean by big data. And this isn't just in terms of size. This is not just about amassing existing data, although it is about that too. This is about rendering into data many aspects of the world that have never been quantified before. Our location, our likes, our dislikes, our supermarket purchases, and whether they point to a higher risk of obesity or diabetes. This is what you might have heard called as a datification of our lives, this trail of information that we all leave behind us every day that feeds into the big data world. Interestingly, information that at certain points in history and time where torture has been used to extract from people, we now leave in our digital wake every minute of every day. And certainly the internet has reshaped how humanity communicates, but big data is different. It marks a transformation in how society processes that information. And this, of course, is only just the beginning, why it's great to have an event like this where we're talking about the innovation in the future. It's so important that those conversations take place. It is already profoundly changing the way governments work and politics work. We've seen a lot of coverage about the US elections and how data played its part in that or not. And when it comes to generating economic growth, providing public services, we've heard about the eGov, or fighting wars, those who can harness big data will certainly have an advantage going forward. Data analytics has become a prominent, permanent feature of a business landscape that Moore's law has forever altered. But we do need to understand some of the vulnerabilities here, understand where they lie and not shy away from having those conversations. Automated systems are now running the show, determining what news feeds we see, what adverts we are sent, and how much we even pay for a product. These automated processes are no longer simply tools at our disposal. They are often making decisions themselves. They are invisible chaperones, if you like, that shape our online experiences. And exposing these, as you can see here, can cause outrage, quite rightly. Some recent research showed that 2/3 of some X-billion Facebook users, however many there are these days, don't realise that algorithms are deciding what they see when they log on. So let's add a bit of facial recognition to this mix. We've seen the recent launch of the iPhone X, but it's increasingly used by government and private sector alike, and is now being used by Apple as a selling point in terms of security. And one important difference between faces, so your face and other biometric data you might use to get onto your phone or your tablet, is that it works from a distance, that anybody with a phone can take a picture for facial recognition programs then to use. And your face is not just a name tag. It displays a lot of other information about you, and machines can read that too. Information about certain medical conditions, genetic conditions, even about sexuality. It was able to identify, AI was able to identify faces that were gay extraordinarily recently. Just imagine that in countries where homosexuality is a crime, a truly terrifying prospect. Ethnicity. Let me introduce you to Bernard on the left, Dylan on the right. Anyone seen these two chaps before in the media? Hopefully not. They are convicted criminals from the US, being processed by the US court system, having committed very similar crimes and having had and have very similar background information to their name. And when due to go in front of the parole board in the US, they were subject of algorithms which sought to determine the likelihood of them reoffending. Bernard, on the left, scored higher than Dylan, so was seen as a greater risk. Why? Why do you think? The colour of his skin. I read an article this weekend just gone about predictive policing that aims to work out when and where a crime will take place, which promises a future of data-driven law enforcement. But a flaw in the software was recently identified by a lobby group. Minority Report coming to anyone else's mind in that context there? So the algorithms, which are so often hidden, and that's the point, can have life-changing impacts. And algorithms, after all, are they not, are our own opinions and biases, which we've heard about this morning, embedded into code. Now, before I allow you to sit back knowing there's a comfortable distance, I would hope, between you and Bernard or Dylan, this is not restricted to criminals. This is about each and every one of us, each and every day. And this caught my eye only last week. Anyone seen this chap online on your Facebook feed? No? Good. Now, underneath, you can't see it terribly well, but it says at the bottom, the internet has erupted over the way a man dressed in a suit was eating his chicken nuggets in some fast food restaurant. And we all know what happens when the internet erupts, don't we? So this image went everywhere. So what had he done? Anyone get what was that? I missed that. So had he stolen them from a child? Do you think he'd nabbed them from some toddler screaming? Did he steal them from the fast food chain? Had he behaved in some other egregious way? Wait for it, it's truly shocking. He was eating with a fork. Yeah. So this sort of public shaming of this individual, who can potentially be recognised with facial recognition, because he was eating his lunch in peace, he wasn't doing anything to anybody else, he was just eating quietly at his lunch break. Parents thought he was wearing a suit, eating his food with a fork, and his image went viral. I recently heard an AI researcher, actually only this weekend gone as well, because it is everywhere at the minute, suggesting that people should be warned if the house they're entering into has an Echo, Google Home or other digital assistants that are available, saying that when she knows they are there, she holds a more guarded conversation, conscious of the possibility of her words being observed, recorded or dissected. So again, just think for a moment about that. Someone in that space is saying there should be an automatic reference to the fact that it's existing when you walk into the property. We use Google to search the world. Google uses our searches to search us. We are constantly being watched. This is not hyperbole. This is simply fact. Snowden and the events around that some years ago now, but should all give us pause. It was unfortunate that it became so politicised, in my view, because actually this was less that we are living in a totalitarian state, but that we are creating the infrastructure to allow it to happen. An issue touched on earlier in this morning's session, that a challenge to GCHQ's use of non-specific warrants to authorise the bulk hacking of smartphones, computers and networks in the UK is starting at the Court of Appeal in the UK at this moment. So does this have to mean, does big data have to mean Big Brother? Well, I would suggest that's up to us. In advanced democracies, at least, legislation seeks to embed a set of principles around how such data should be handled. And I'm not going to go for too much detail into legislation because I want to talk about other things, but let's look for a second about what data protection law or legislation aspires to do, to give individuals, to give you control, autonomy, access to your information, to require those you give your information to treat that information securely, to tell you what they're doing with their information, to be accountable for that processing. And knowing what we all know in this room, I would suggest that this should not make us throw our hands up in despair about how legislation is stifling innovation. Rather, we need to understand how fundamental it is to each of us as individuals and as business leaders. We've seen how every aspect of our lives now has this data attached to it, and there are huge potential gains to be had, especially in areas we've again heard touched on this morning: healthcare, education. But let's just for a second take a greater step back than we already have, just for a moment. There is an even broader perspective that we need to be aware of to allow us to engage in this area intelligently. Addressing the potential dark side of big data and ensuring protections are in place for us all is important. It's hugely important. But it is also, to a degree, somewhat of a first world problem. Because what if you have no data, no identity? How easy is it then to access healthcare, education, services, banking, to vote? 1.5 billion people across the world lack officially recognised identification. That's a fifth of the planet. And most of these will be the most powerless and vulnerable. I'd urge you, when time allows, to have a little look at this initiative, which considers identity as fundamentally linked to human rights. And it's very easy to trivialise this, but think for a moment how much you rely on official, accurate, good information about yourself to conduct everyday life. I think we all sometimes take it for granted, and I will be forever grateful, sorry that sounds trite, but I mean it, that I live in a jurisdiction where I've been able to spend my professional life working to protect data about us all. And I want to inject this broader perspective to help us understand how this conversation is not just a concern for technologists, the conversation around big data, I mean. It's a concern for everybody. All of these and more. And Colin this morning talked about the importance of all stakeholders being involved, and he's absolutely right. Because even something as seemingly innocuous as price discrimination on a flight or anything like that can point to a more profound, and I would argue disturbing, social policy concern. Who is being discriminated against and why? The solution, the response, has to involve not just regulation, not just technology. There has to be a mix of those things, of course, but also it involves ethics, culture, morals. So this is as much as about humanities as it is anything else. Because in the small data era, privacy was certainly the central challenge. In the big data era, the challenge is going to be safeguarding ourselves as human beings, our free will, our moral choice, human volition, human agency, who is included, who is excluded. In a world of big data, I would suggest it's the most human of traits that we need to foster: creativity, intuition, intellectual ambition, morality. Humans and their ingenuity, not data, is the source of progress. After all, if Henry Ford had queried big data algorithms to discover what his customers wanted, he would have developed faster ones of these, would he not? When I ask Siri, are you cleverer than me? She answers, that's something I don't know. Well, she should know, because the answer is that you and I are far cleverer than she is. Because algorithms don't know anything in a true sense, nor can they have emotional input about experiences, feelings, imagined futures, and interactions with other human beings. So, if you want truly big data, assembling a baby, a human being, us, involves the biggest amount of information you can encounter. So, in these discussions, please let's stay human, recognizing what a vital role we all play in the conversation. And certainly, big data and AI has a lot to offer if we pool artificial and human intelligence. Because data is a resource, it's a tool. It informs rather than explains, depending on how well it's used. But we must use it appreciating its power and its imperfections. We all need to work together to determine where the lines should be drawn and who should draw them. And have a little look at what we in this small island have to offer. And it's so great to hear everyone else's perspective on this, because we do underplay this, we do undersell ourselves, and there's plenty more boxes that could go in here. And Mark this morning spoke about the opportunities of being in a small jurisdiction, and I would echo Graham's earlier comments about Guernsey's strengths. There's so many of them. But, and it's a big but, if we are going to have a place at the table of the data economy, just playing by the rules is not going to be enough. Just ask any football team. England and other ones are available. So what will be enough? Well, that's for this community to decide. This public discussion today, public discourse in general, is such a vital part. None of us involved here should underestimate that. But one thing that struck me recently was how interwoven this area has now become with questions of ethics, and that was something highlighted by Jay earlier, interestingly. And I think it will become even more so as data impacts our lives more and more. Any doctors in the house? No. They sign up to a Hippocratic oath, do they not? Every doctor that you see will have signed up to this. After the financial crash, I don't know if you can see, but this is a Hippocratic oath from 2 financiers that after the crash wanted to sign up to their own for the markets, which is very interesting to read if you have the time. Why not? It doesn't even come out well, does it, in that slide, but it was right on mine. Forget that, but the principle being, why not have our own? Why not sign up to our own set of standards that incorporate all of the things that we've spoken about today, and maybe more? So maybe that's for 1.1, the conference next, Jennifer. Okay, we can agree on the list there. Sorry about the typo error there. So my first slide asked whether big data and data protection was a zero-sum game, which means one wins, one loses. So the question in there is, are the benefits of big data so incredible that the risks don't matter? Well, I'm very clear as to the answer to that, and the answer is no. But the benefits of big data are so incredible that we must intelligently and constructively address the risks that come with it. And if we don't, surely we can't unlock the benefits to their maximum. And data protection is the clear opportunity for the state, for our government, to impose some of the controls so necessary in this area into law. Many countries have data protection laws, so it has to go beyond that if Guernsey are going to be special. And all of us here have a part to play. And Mark talked this morning about a crisis of wisdom. Well, let's buck that trend, because for too long, policy has lagged behind technology in this space. And maybe, just maybe, we can be different. And events like this can really mark the start of something different. So maybe we can grab the opportunity that I'm clear presents itself in the data economy by treating data as something more than simply a commodity to be exchanged for money. It's about every single one of us, our dignity, our autonomy, our control. And again, it's the information, knowledge, wisdom that we've heard talked about earlier as well, putting all that together in a very attractive bundle for the economy. So this is where we started all those slides ago, with the question, why can't we become a trusted location in the big data era? And this very much chimes, and we didn't liaise, did we, at all? Because I wasn't around to liaise with other speakers, so it's very good to hear some of these themes chiming through. And it chimes with what Colin said earlier. This is my reply to you with that question. Thank you.